Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Rutherford County School Board. Tonight's a work session. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Board Attorney Lauren Bush. Board, if you look down number 4, is there anything you want moved on the agenda? If not, sneak a peek at number 5 there, consent agenda, tab 1. I'll give you a few seconds. Is there anything there that you want to move? Okay, if not, go on to page 4. Visitors, I believe, is the next thing, and we'll have some visitors tomorrow night. Maybe yes, maybe no, don't know. Mr. Director, number 7.
7 will be the guest speaker tomorrow night, the president of Tennessee Tech, Dr. Philip Oldham, will be speaking. The next one is a series of recognitions. I guess Colonel Houchins will be here for JROTC. I don't think I've seen him this year. Luke Love, who is actually the FFA president this year. In fact, you get a farming magazine, the Co-op magazine or something, his picture is in it for this particular issue. So there's a good honor. And then Ms. Pilgrim is going to go over some that have won state awards in career and technical education tomorrow night. Also to do that. A couple of other state placements and winners, the Riverdale High School first in the state for bullseye, third in the state again, and then wrestling champions from Smyrna, Siegel, and Blackman. So, those will be tomorrow evening, hopefully. Number 9, Mr. Clardy will give us an update. Looking at Rockvale High and how we're coming along. Looks nice. So it's been a while since we've done an update, so we're going to do that. And I think there may be a special guest tomorrow night on number 10. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And number 11, want to go on to that one?
Yes, sir. If the board has no questions.
TN-Ready scores counting on students' final grade. Due to the student score validity questions related to online TN-Ready assessments for 2018, Tennessee Legislature has passed the following amended language. Section 2, Tennessee Code annotated section 491-617 is amended by adding the following language as a new subsection. Notwithstanding the subsection A, each local board of education may choose the percentage within the range of 0% to 15% that scores from TN-Ready assessments administered in 2017-18 school year shall count on a student's final grade for the spring semester. And the motion is to set to 0% TN-Ready student accountability scores administered in 17-18 school year on a student's final grade for the spring semester unless prohibited by the state. And with the second session that the legislature did, I don't think there's going to be any changes. I think that's kind of locked in. My recommendation is really to do it basically for grades 3 through 12. I think there were enough issues. Some of the elementary principles, I think they'll be the most valid. It was paper and pencil. But the issues that you have very often is when they big brother and sisters, not tests may not count, they're having trouble. There's a mindset change that sometimes takes place. And I'm not sure, there's another state law which says the scores have to be back within 5 days of our last day of school. So I'm not sure on those paper pencil tests that they would even be back in elementary. But my recommendation to you for this year, I just don't think the validity is strong. And too many issues, too many sub-tests and things missed that we set it to 0%, which is what it was before they started saying include some of it for second semester. But I'm for just counting at 0% this year unless y'all see different.
Board?
I'm good with that.
The learning is in the classroom and the teaching.
Yes, sir.
That's what, and we've done so much problems with testing, it's actually got into the learning hours.
Has there been any talk
that you've heard from the Commissioner's office as far as what they plan to do in the future?
You know, I do know the comptroller's office was about, at least in one school district yesterday, maybe some others, because the legislature did ask them to do some investigative work related to that, because the Questar contract is up for renewal. It's a $30 million per year contract. So I think the issue is, what's their performance been? Can they make the delivery if we knew it, or does contracts need to be changed, or do they start all over again? And no one's saying anything now. I think they're probably waiting till some of this comptroller's report.
So if this online issue cannot be corrected timely, are we back to tractor and trailers full of boxes of tests?
It was a pretty good load in some this year at elementary. Well, you know, ESSA requires annual assessments in 3 through 8 in English language arts and math. ESSA does not require social studies. It does require science be reported, but it doesn't require annual reports for that. Actually, ESSA says only one assessment has to be given in high school. There are a few across the country, there's a few states that have actually said SAT or ACT. But Tennessee, and you know the EOC assessments, of course you served on that committee, they're dropping next year the chemistry, right?
Yes, sir.
And the English 3, the junior. Right. There were so many tests being given the junior year because a lot of U.S. history kids would take it. You have your ACT, you know, your junior year, you had your integrated math 3, then you had the English 3. But there was a lot of complaints across the state for the number of assessments given to juniors.
And the Commissioner was very accepting of those recommendations, so, you know.
I think, again, I've heard the statistic that the 2 states that are giving the most assessment is Tennessee and Utah in total number of tests that's being given. So, and you were part of those discussions, but I do think from a financial standpoint that ultimately testing will be more online, simply because I understand the cost of paper and pencil per student runs over $20 a student, whereas you're about $9 to $10 for the online assessment. Of course, you're printing all that paper and distribution, and then you're having to scan that way. So I just think this company hasn't gotten it right. Again, I said this before, and I'm repeating myself. If you go to apply for a job, most of it's probably going to be online. If you take a test for that job, it's probably going to be online. There are platforms and people that deliver based on these assessments. Of course, with Tennessee trying to do a lot of the writing components, that's a whole another issue about consumption of time and handling that. But, you know, I think I'd be naive to say we're not going to see online here for a long time, either coming back. I don't know about next year yet, but I think ultimately it'll be more and more just simply dollar driven.
Board?
Mr. Odom. What about the teachers? You know, we talked about a little bit about that earlier, but can you, do we know for sure where that's going to stand as far as what options we're going to have as far as it impacting their
evaluation?
Yeah.
It's the effect scores for teachers, which typically shows, you know, effect scores are also going in place for schools, also for districts.
Right.
But we know that basically, what I understand what the legislature said, you cannot use these results to do a school's, that ABC score for the achievement and the value-added piece. And likewise, for the district and for teachers, is my understanding.
And that's what I thought. Has it been approved by the
I haven't seen the
governor?
business rules yet. We were told kind of the end of last week that the commissioner would come forth with more guidance, you know, related to that. And as of today's Wednesday, I have not seen that yet. I'll forward that to y'all when I get to kind of the business rules and we know how they're going to treat it. I think I know the legislature's intent. There not be any. There was some talk really in the first version where the kind of the 10% remained, that if it helped the teacher, they could use it. But as I said to you, and I actually even said to the principals, you know, the teachers to receive tenure have to have a 4 or 5 effect scores the last 2 years. You have teachers that would be very interested, if their scores were valid, to be able to use that. You also have those paper and pencils up to 5th grade that those scores will be more valid, you know, in that it might be a 4 or 5 for that teacher. So I would not be totally opposed to if it helps a teacher or it benefits something in that. If they earn that, if their students earn that 4 or 5, I'm the last one to say we shouldn't let them have it, you know. So, but I'll have to wait till I see what the business rules say.
Are there still testing issues going on now?
Today was, as far as I know, today went quite well. They turned off speech. They turned off the speech thing, and that seemed to have helped a little. But I think you've got, as I mentioned last night too, where they had a lot of those one-on-one computers and stuff, you actually have some districts that are probably completed or so. So I think your whole volume capacity thing across the state is declining every day. You know, all of our elementary paper and pencil, they're through. Those are shipped. So yeah. Some of the first ones are already shipped, the hand-scored writing, I think.
Talked to a couple today, and they lacked 1 or 2 students that had been absent or something along that line. But they had very minor problems.
The original excuse, if you will, last week was that, then correct me, please, that a dump truck had run over the line
That was
between.
about 3 or 4 days into it. For
Okay.
the dump truck.
Sir? Well,
We were days into it.
I was. Does anybody know anything about this?
Did you read Chalkbeat this morning?
No.
For creativity.
You should have read Chalkbeat this morning. That's that that reports school news. They went out to locate where this dump truck supposedly.
That's what I'm interested in right there.
And it was somewhere north of Knoxville in a rural county. Of course, it came out to us that it was a main line to the Atlanta hub or something. But I didn't say this. You go back and read Chalkbeat for today, and they went and looked to see where they could find where it was. And that's what
Were they successful?
well, they think they named the area that it was in where this happened. But it didn't seem like it would break down the whole state.
If a dump truck runs into something, there's probably going to be a police report. I'd like to see that police report. I'm a private citizen. I'm entitled to look. So if anybody has a copy of the police report of the dump truck, I'd like to see it.
They said,
It was north of Knoxville.
and you know, ENA, they said it was an Education Networks of America. School districts usually either use AT&T or Education Networks of America to provide internet service. They're competing entities. But ENA leases line space from AT&T. AT&T told us they didn't have any word of lines internet being out.
I don't know either. I'm just asking for a picture. I just settle for a picture of a dump truck. Somebody just send me one of those.
There was one on Facebook, you didn't see it?
No, I missed that.
Does the state have to test everyone at the same time?
Tests are normed for a period of time. Not exactly the same time, but in other words, if you take it 6 months into the school year or 8 months into the school year to get, I'll just say a letter grade, it's changed. The number of questions you have to get correct would increase the longer you're in school. So when they open that window, the idea is the test is normed for this results at this time. So there is kind of an acceptable window in there that they have to. Now, a few years ago, they did the writing back in February. And I'll be honest, Don Odom's opinion, I would tend to separate that writing back off, and if you're going to do it, do that in February or something. gives you time to score it, but then it keeps us from, these poor kids have had a whole lot of tests and days in a row, and now these high school people are going to AP exams, and they're doing into their certification and licensing for CTE. And I just know how I feel after I've had days and days and days of testing, that it's hard to keep the concentration level. I just don't think it's wise to do that at one time.
Well, we have another meeting this month. I don't have the date with me, but I'm tempted to say to Commissioner, you know, you've had 3 tries at this thing by doing a full-blown platform. Why don't you just integrate it in, do some writing and do some computer till you get to the point where it can be managed, you know, as a full testing platform. So that they just jumped into the deep end of the pool right from the get-go, they've yet to make it out of the pool. And I think some kind of variation would be the smart process.
Easy in of something.
Yes, sir.
We have a recommendation, we need a motion. Tomorrow night. That's what I said. Insurance update. Anything, Dr. Anthony?
Yes, we had our
We
meeting
did.
last Thursday, and through the mail you should have received, if you have the county insurance, the Midpoint Clinic updates were that as of yesterday, Vanderbilt at Walgreens, that clinic is no longer at no cost, but also an update that the CVS Minute Clinics and the Kroger's Little Clinics are still in the network. So they also sent a reminder about not forgetting to do the biometric screening and the health risk assessment, and that's all due as September 30th.
Questions? Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Director? Update.
The only thing that I gave you tonight, printed for you, I mentioned last night we were doing budget that I had looked at another bill out there that has a serious fiscal impact. I did see it was signed by the governor on the 26th of April. I think maybe there's an amendment that may delay this. It's Senate Bill 2196, and this is the one that requires LAAs to employ 1 licensed social worker in each school that conducts classes in any grade from kindergarten through grade 12. This bill would be, actually says from in next year, 18-19, you got 1 in every elementary school, which would be 25 people for us. Then the next year is your middle, and the next year is your high. But there's interesting thing, the physical summaries here. Look over on kind of page 3, and I'll show you. I know this is one of Mr. Young's favorite topics, the unfunded mandate. If you look over on page 3, where the summary of the bill, the fiscal note for increased state expenditures for fiscal year 1920 and any subsequent years, $134,400. Look at below the increased local expenditures, $64,293,200 in 1819 for school districts across the state of Tennessee, and then the next year, roughly $85 million, and then the third year, roughly $106 million every year, subsequent years, to implement this bill. Look towards the bottom at the second bullet from the bottom. Look at that bullet. I put you a little asterisk there. No additional state funding will be provided. Therefore, any impact from hiring additional social workers will be paid for by the LEAs. I mean, this came off the state legislative website. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I would like for them to share the cost.
Yeah.
If they're going to do this. You know?
You didn't happen to check the voting record,
You can see it. I didn't print it for you. It's there.
okay, of how our delegation voted on this?
Most of what you get is committee vote, but it was overwhelming, yes, in the House and Senate vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's going to probably happen, there's another thing, one of the amendments that was added near the last days was to send it to kind of a committee for a report. And they're talking about changing the function of social workers, guidance counselors, psychologists and all. So what may happen, they may come out with some kind of a formula that counts some of your people that may be a counselor to meet part of this mandate of some type. So I think that's why I don't think you could implement it in 1819 at all, because those guidelines aren't done. But it is a bill, and it's signed by the governor, so it's going to be there even next year now. Even if we don't implement it this year, it's going to be there unless somebody rescinds it or changes. So you can do a little research, Ms. Moore, if you want to some more.
Order.
We've sent to the state finance, and you haven't heard yet from anything. We sent it, Mr. Sandvig, to please ask them, what do you know about this? But that's just off the state legislative website.
I'm sure they'll tout that they save taxpayers a lot of money when they do this. And all they did is pass the buck.
I really like that bullet at the bottom. That says a lot, doesn't it?
When you look at the staggering millions that have been just thrown away on this testing, and then look at legislation like this right here. If the general taxpayer in Rutherford County or any other county wants to know who's raising their taxes, you're wasting your time going to the Rutherford County Courthouse. You need to go to Capitol Hill. That's where you need to go. Moving on, Mr. Director. Anything else?
I didn't bring that up last night because I thought it would be too upsetting. We'd get from our budget before we talk about
Well, we had a tough night.
hiring 25 more people immediately or something. I think the next one's the Tennessee Legislative Network, right?
Okay. Ms. Moore, anything?
I'll defer any report until tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holliday?
I'll defer to tomorrow as well.
General discussion by board members, number 16.
As we're talking about this SB 2196, I think you've done this in the past, Mr. Sandvig, is you've come up with a dollar amount for unfunded federal and state mandates. I don't know that with what you experienced at the last health ed meeting, that putting together those numbers would not be appropriate, and also maybe talk to our commission about all the homes that are going up throughout the county, even outside the city limits. So, you know, with homes come children. So unless they're going to quit building homes, that's the only way I can see that we're going to not have to build schools. So, you know, we may want to have some of those numbers too.
There's this marvelous thing called multi-track that some of the commissioners are beginning to talk about.
They are ill-informed, because I served on a committee with Mr. Odom when we considered it with Dr. Ragsdale.
Yes.
So it certainly is a system that does not and has not worked.
Yeah.
Your actual operating costs go up when you go 12 months a year, where you, if there's any saving, it's in some of the buildings. What happened, Orlando did it when Disney World opened. And Dr. Ragsdale sent myself and Gail Tume down there to attend the convention. And I asked the people if you really want to find out, go to the Shoney's or the other little places to eat and ask the waitresses and all, what do you know about this? How does it handle your family? It was not positive. They were so glad when Orlando dropped it. They just went ahead and dropped it. As soon as they could handle it, you know, and handle the influx of people, they didn't stick with it. But there are places out there that do it. I think maybe Charlotte and Mecklenburg, which is seeing unprecedented growth, may be trying to do some now. I know of one, is it Lake Charles out of St. Louis or somewhere that's maybe doing some of that. One is kind of a community. And most of the others are out on the West Coast, in California, basically.
A lot of those plans are implemented, and they last 3, 4, 5 years. and then they drop them because they're more expensive. Don't appear to work very well.
Well,
That's nationwide. I'm sure it works somewhere.
back when Mr. Watson was here, we had a lot of discussions about that because of the disagreements we were having with the county commission on school building and all. And I found a couple of sources, again, this was 18 years ago or so. If your growth is in that 2 to 2.5% range, you have a fighting chance with your existing tax structure of maintaining the program. And that is one of the things that I'm very grateful that our growth is running more in that 2.5% range in recent years, because back at that point we were running 4.5 and peaked at more, wasn't it closer to 6.5 or 07, 08 or 06, 07. So when we're getting the concerns about how long this can carry on, well, we should be able to carry on with this 2 to 2.5% range of growth and provide the facilities needed to educate these children.
Sandvik, last night you just touched on something, and if you would, I'd like for you to touch on it a little bit more detail. You were being asked, maybe it was at Health and Ed, I'm not sure who asked you, for some estimates on not this year, but the following year.
Yes.
Could you touch on that just a minute?
Well, actually, I think the chairman of the committee, Commissioner Allen, asked that at our meeting on the 22nd, and it's just, and I can come up with an estimate, you know, I have to decide if we want to go high or low, but there are so many unknowns a year out. If the state put through a 4% raise, that would totally skew it. If our growth picked up, if our growth dropped off, if the social worker thing winds up being implemented, I can give an estimate a year out. We used to do some of that working with the county, again, back in that time when relationships were so contentious. And one of my frustrations at the time was the numbers that were being put together, and this was before Lisa Nolan, the numbers that were being put together showed us growing at an unsustainable rate and the county budget growing at a reasonable rate. And when I would go back and analyze, we weren't growing as quickly as these projections, and the county general budget was growing more quickly than their projections. So I spent a lot of time on projects like that in those early years. So you know, it's a very nebulous thing projecting a year out, but it's the same thing we face in the building program, looking 1, 2, 3 years out.
Well, he just mentioned a bill that, if implemented, as is going to add, and you mentioned last night that you already knew about this, the insurance, at approximate,
yes,
which is a pretty big increase again.
And that's kind of my gut feel from having watched our trends over the years. Yeah.
Maybe we could just ask the commission, you know, since we're, soon to be $1,300 to $1,400 below the state average, just ask the commission to say, hey, let us just be 1,000 below state average, and if we took that 300 or 400 per student, we wouldn't have a budget problem right now. That would give us about 12 or 13 million.
Well, and one of the points that does come back and is made and is legitimate from the commission point of view, the report card excludes capital costs. And because we are a growing system, our capital costs are higher, and we are putting local money into those capital costs. There is some truth to that. There's some validity to those comments, but we still have to cover the operating costs.
The year before, we were roughly 1,000 below, but you know, your report kind of runs 1 year behind. And that was the year they put the $5 million in for us to do the technology pieces.
Yeah.
So my prediction is when the next report card comes out, I thought it would go up, but I didn't think it would go all the way to 1,300, you know, but it did. You know, when you saw your growth, but it just shows you what even 5 or 6 million, how much it can swing that $200 or $300 per pupil times roughly 45,000 students that you're talking
Actually, I think Mr. Estes made that estimate that would kill the, that'd take care of the shortfall if they would just do that.
about. I appreciate them helping us with buildings over the years. I really do. They've stepped up in most cases to add or build. Of course, we still have the 146 portables or something. Is it? Okay. Because we took over the ones from Head Start.
Yeah.
4 from Head Start.
Head Start let us have theirs, where they moved into John Copeland, let us have theirs, so we got.
Growing.
So, you got 1.5 schools or something in portables still, that's what you've got.
And they're really not portables, they are trailers.
Amen.
Board members,
Mr.
further
Chairman,
discussion on any topic? Yes, Ms. Moore?
I'd like to go back if we could actually, because, you know, they say curiosity killed the cat. And Mr. Odom, thank you for bringing us this information. I went ahead and pulled up and researched the vote on this bill that we were talking about with the social workers, for the social workers.
Wood
And
voted against it, didn't he? Am I right?
he did. It has been signed by the governor. And as far as our representatives, Representative White and Representative Terry both voted in favor of it. Representative Rudd voted against it. And then Representative Sparks apparently was present at the meeting but did not vote. And both of our senators, Ketron and Reeves, both voted for it as well. So I will be reaching out.
Unfunded mandates, nothing like them.
You know, when we talk about estimating years in advance, and Mr. Sandvig, you mentioned if the state throws out a 4% increase for teacher pay or something like that, and we may think that that's an absurd comment or something, but one of the things that I'm looking at in the federal report is that across the country, the atmosphere of teacher strikes right now, most often occurring in right-to-work states, which Tennessee is a right-to-work state, where the union has been attacked, and its emphasis has been decreased. There is a seemingly backlash that is occurring here, and so the idea of a 4% pay increase or something like that is not absurd when we talk about, you know, how would we keep the climate calm and appropriate in our relationship with our teachers. I can remember training that we received as board members that said we fought hard to decrease the emphasis of the union in their negotiating power. The last thing you want to do is actually enter into a memorandum of understanding, which is exactly what we did in Rutherford County. And we did that because we have an excellent working relationship where we value every single staff member, most notably our certified teaching staff. And I just want to say from this board seat how much I appreciate all of our teachers. And in this climate where some may feel like that they need to take action in order to be appreciated, I want to preemptively say how much we do appreciate every single teacher in our system.
You know, another thing I would like for them to do, for example, I'm certainly for keeping the retirement system fully funded, and Tennessee has one of the best in the nation, one of the best in the world, actually, they come and told us. But it would be nice, maybe instead of going up the $3 million in 1 year, maybe 2 years. Because $3 million, if you get $600,000 or so on property tax per penny, that's significant. Whereas if you could then break it down, maybe your growth might handle it a little more. So if they just look sometimes at some of these things, to staggering them, you know, phasing them in, much easier to absorb than getting a hard lick. What, like this bill, if it were gone into effect this year, this is impossible. That's not, you can put it in law, but it's not going to happen, whether it's needed or not. But think about how to phase it in and make it easier on districts to handle it over a period of time. And then you could see the second year coming. You would know.
if this was being imposed immediately, what would the cost to us be? Do you know, Mr. Sandvik?
It would be 62.5 times 25 teachers, as that many elementary. But now some would be state, some would be, well, it wouldn't been any this year because they put no money in. 62.5 times 25 teachers, 25 elementary schools, that would have been this year. 3 million what? $1.5 million? To Rutherford County.
And that's going to grow for the next 3 years.
You add the middle and you add the high. Now, I'm not opposed to these people. I'm not sure we don't need them to a certain extent to help families today. Just help us to pay for it. If it's important at the state level, help locals cover that cost.
Mr. Sandvik, could you, for us specifically as an LEA, taking those numbers then and the breakout, how it graduates each year from elementary to middle to high school, could you give us a 3-year breakout on that, on the impact to the budget?
It's just your number of schools. It's the number of middle schools. What, 12? You have to count alternative also here because it's every school that houses children. 47 schools. Yeah.
So
What was the average on the salary again?
62.
that's probably low because they generally have masters. So
Does that
three
include our
to
benefit?
$3.25 million, that should include some benefit dollars, yes, ma'am. So by the time it was finished, $3.5 million.
Board?
Almost $3 million.
Most of master's degree with most social workers would have that level. So.
Ending our general discussion, are we? Nothing else?
I'm depressed, so.
It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That's a health problem. Is he covered? No. All right, tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, regular meeting. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.